the Lakers and the Raptors seem to be really linked when it comes to a potential trade. And there seems to be some type of traction just based on the various reports, and reports just continuously keep coming out. Toronto is clearly not a very good team. It's time to move on with that team. They're getting ready to lose many of their players. So, of course, it makes sense that they're opening the door to potential trades, and they're willing to unload pretty much anybody for the right price. There's even talks about Pascal Siakam, OG Anunoby. Like, are they going to end up trading those guys if the right deal comes along? Lakers, I don't believe, have any chance in either of those two. But the players that they're primarily linked to is a Gary Trent Jr. and Fred VanVleet, two guys that are free agents this upcoming season, or very likely will be free agents this upcoming season. And Toronto Raptors are not going to do any type of extensions, it looks like. They're actually looking to try to trade them. Now, they do want a first for both of them, at least, but I don't know if they're really going to get that. Fred VanVleet is not having the best season this season, but he is a guy that has shown like he can be a real contributor. He can be a all-star level player, and he could be huge for the right team, but he's already turned down a 4-year, $114 million contract. He's looking for somewhere in the ballpark of $30 million a year. So he's been heavily linked to the Lakers in some type of potential trade. Now, problem is if you're the Lakers, do you really want to pay him $30 million a year? I don't really think he's worth that, in my opinion. Even if he did return to form, which I think very likely he might, there's still a lot of questions with him. Now, Gary Trent Jr., I would absolutely love on the Lakers. He's a guy that is still very young, 23 years old. Last season, he was like second or third in the league in most 30-point games. So he's a guy that can get hot, a guy that can shoot the ball. Both of these guys can. But to kind of break it down in a specific order, looking at Fred VanVleet, like I said, he's a guy that wants some big money. He wants some serious money. He wants like Tyler Hero money, $130 million, somewhere in that ballpark, which is just a little too much for Fred. But I will say this type of point guard traditionally is really good next to LeBron James. He is more closer to a shooting guard than, a traditional point guard. He's best probably off the ball. But if he can kind of get back to form, he's a guy that can shoot 40% from three. And being on a team like the Lakers could really help his production. Anthony Davis, LeBron James, any type of deal, you're probably losing Russell Westbrook because the idea is to get all of these guys. The Lakers very likely would be doing something like Russell Westbrook and potentially both first for Fred as well as Gary Trent Jr. And then there's even talks about Chris Boucher, which I wouldn't mind. I wouldn't really mind that. There were also talks about Otto Porter, but he's out for the season now since he's had surgery. So he's off the table now. Otto Porter would have been great, in my opinion. If we could have gotten Fred, Gary Trent, and Otto, I would have been all for that. But he's out of the question now. So very likely it would be a Chris Boucher, who they have been willing to trade. There was even talks about him as well as Kim Burks potentially being in a deal last season with the Lakers and some THT type trade. But nonetheless, the Toronto Raptors are still willing to unload these guys, right? Because if you can get something for Fred rather than just losing him for nothing, then I think that you do it, right? Whatever it could take. Personally, if I'm the Lakers, I wouldn't really want to give up both firsts for this. And I don't really think any team would, right? I definitely could see a team taking a shot on Gary Trent Jr. and maybe giving up a first for him. I don't see Fred yielding a first, because what team is going to want to pay him all of that money and give up a first in the process to do so? I don't see that being a possibility. And I don't think Fred's going to get anywhere near that kind of money. I just don't, because he's not many teams have that kind of money. And how many teams would be willing to give up that kind of money to bring in a guy like Fred if you're a rebuilding team? I just don't really see that happening. Now, it's not like Fred is, 35 or anything like that, but still, it's not a move that I really see some of these teams with cap space jumping at the opportunity to just give Fred a max contract. So I don't think he's worth a first, in my opinion. Plus, he's having a little bit of a rough season. Gary Trent definitely is worth a first. Just because of his age and what he's able to provide. He could be your starting shooting guard for the foreseeable future. He's got good size, can knock down the three ball at an efficient clip. Look, Fred and Gary Trent would be fantastic next to LeBron James, Anthony Davis, and, you'd lose Russell Westbrook, but they would be great with those teams. And realistically, like, if you're the Lakers, you're probably trying to sign a guy like that. You wouldn't be able to get both in the offseason, right? So you're trying to sign probably a Gary Trent Jr. anyway. So if you can get him now and in the process get a Fred VanVleet and get, Chris Boucher, like that would be an ideal in my opinion. But Fred, I think, would be a really nice compliment next to LeBron James. That sort of, George Hill type player, that 3-and-D style point guard that can just knock it down at an efficient clip. He could do playmaking if you need him to. He can score if you need him to. He's a guy that can do a little bit of everything for the Lakers. You could slot him in the starting lineup and then move Dennis Schroeder to your backup lineup and have like that two-man point guard and then start like a Gary Trent at your shooting guard. So I like the idea of Fred. I just don't like the idea of the money you'd have to pay him. And the problem is if you go and trade for him, then you're kind of at the mercy of paying him, right? Like if you go and trade for Fred, you're not going to trade for him and then not give him what he wants and then run the risk of him leaving. So that's something to keep in mind as well. But moving on to Gary Trent Jr., Gary Trent Jr., I think is just perfect compliment, right? He's young, a guy that could be a piece for now and your future. Like you could have Gary Trent for the next 10 years and he'd still be in his prime. That is huge. Like those are the kind of pieces that you need. He's a guy that can get hot. He's a guy that can put the ball in the hoop. He can score on a multitude of levels, play on the ball, play off the ball. These are the kind of guys you really need if you're the Lakers, right? He would really bolster the shooting, become a threat. Him, in my opinion, is worth a first. And I understand Toronto's thinking is like you're getting these three guys, or even two, right? Even if you just get Fred and you get Gary Trent. But, we're giving you these guys that really help you. We want both firsts. But if you're the Lakers, again, do you really want to be that team that has to overpay Fred and give a first in the process, right? Where it's like, I don't think Fred gets a first. I think Gary Trent might get a first. Cool, but if I was the Lakers, I would try to convince, because you do have 2 seconds, I would try to convince them, like, we'll give you the first because it's Gary Trent, and then Fred, we're going to have to overpay him. He's not worth that money. He's not worth that money. So we'll give you the Chicago 2023 second, and we'll give you our 2023 second, and maybe you give a pick swap or something like that. I don't know. But if you could keep one of your firsts, ideally, that would be the best in my opinion, because also that would really open the door for another trade, right? Because now you got a bunch of guards still, right? Yeah, you unloaded Russ, but you just got 2 more guards, where if you can keep one of the firsts, well, then now you could take, say that other first and package, Kendrick Nunn, Lonnie Walker, Patrick Beverley, those 3 guys, and then go do another deal. Maybe get a Boyan and Nerlens Noel, or ideally Alec Burke would be my ideal scenario. But if you could do something like that, then now that team makes a lot of sense, right? You move off of Russ, Bev, Nunn, and you basically bring in Gary Trent, you bring in Fred VanVleet, and you bring in like a Chris Boucher, and then on top of that, you're bringing in like a Boyan. So now you could have, like, literally your starting 5 could be Fred, Gary Trent, Boyan Bogdanovic, LeBron James, and Anthony Davis. If you can't win a championship with that, I don't know what to tell you. That might be the best team LeBron's ever had outside of like Miami's big 3. Like, that is so good. You have all 5 guys can shoot the 3 ball. I mean, LeBron's been rough this season, but for the most part, he should go start balancing out at some point, you'd hope. Maybe not, but even if he doesn't, AD's was much improved shooting before his injury. Gary Trent could shoot the three ball. Fred could shoot the three ball. Boyan is 50, 40, 90 right now. He's shooting elite. If you could get an Alec Burke, that would be even better. And then you could have imagine Dennis Schroeder, Alec Burke. You could have Chris Boucher, Thomas Bryant, Wenyen Gabriel, right? Troy Brown. You just, again, you're deep, you're talented, you got shooting, you got playmaking, you got scoring. Gary Trent is a guy that can go and just go get a bucket for you. He doesn't need setup, which the Lakers, in my opinion, really could use a guy like that. They don't really have a guy that can just go get a bucket, right? And Gary Trent can do that. Yes, LeBron can get a bucket, Russ can get a bucket, Lonnie Walker can get a bucket, but not in the mid-range where they could just, get the ball, cross up, make a couple steps and then boom, pull up, or, dribble, step back, boom, splash, right? We don't really have guys like that can create off the dribble and lead to a bucket. Like Lonnie Walker, he's more spot up, or he's just using his athleticism to get to the rim and finish strong at the rim through a dunk or through contact, right? Same thing with Russ, same thing with LeBron. That's what they are. AD, he can get his own bucket, but usually you have to give him some sort of setup. Here and there, he can go and just generate, get the rebound, run down the court, maybe get you a little step back. He does that step back on the elbow. You do have some guys that can operate some, but not a guy like Gary Trent who can just come in and, again, get the rebound, get down, cross a couple people up, and then just splash a mid-range, splash a three. That would be huge for the Lakers and just open the door so much for potential just offensive schemes and sets, right? So that would be great. I'm not against the Toronto deal. I just am not huge on both firsts. Problem is, I don't think Toronto does it without both firsts. But if you're Toronto and there isn't really anything else, do you just bite the bullet and say, well, we'd rather have seconds than nothing, right? Because I am very confident that Gary Trent and Fred are gone. Fred's already turned down the extension. He wants big money. I don't see them paying him big money because this team isn't very good. Gary Trent is they've been putting him in and out of the starting lineup to the sixth man, trying to find some, which isn't because of Gary Trent. They're just trying to find something, some lineup that works, and they just haven't been able to find it. I think Gary Trent's gone. Gary Trent, he may be able to get you a first or something, but outside of that, if you're not getting anything for Fred VanVleet, do you just say, okay, well, let's get the Lakers first and let's get the seconds and let them, let these contracts be the Lakers' problem, and we'll take on Russ, that clears the salary off, and then now we have some salary space to kind of retool in the offseason. Maybe we look to trade OG, maybe we look to trade Pascal, or we just keep them both and again, do some kind of retooling. And then the Lakers, Boucher, I feel would just be an add-on. Look, Boucher is a solid piece. He's 30 years old, but he's shooting terribly this season. He's shooting only 28% from three, which he is a career 33% three-point shooter, so he's not great lights out, but he did have in 2020, 2021, he was 38% from three on 5 attempts. So, if he could get back to that would be ideal, right? If he's taking 4 3-point attempts a game and get back to 38%, or even if he could just get to 36%, 35%, right? To have a guy that can do that. Thing is that he's more of a hustle guy. He's a power forward center, but he's probably closer to a small forward. In reality, he's 6'9" in size, but he has that mismatch at times at the power forward center position. So he could be used as a small ball center. You could play him on the wing as a 3-and-D. He is 30 years old, so he's older. He basically is who he is. But he's roughly a 10-5 guy, right? So he is a guy that can be a solid contributor, right? He averages about 10 points per game and about 5 rebounds per game. He's a guy that plays roughly 20 minutes or so for Toronto night in and night out. He's played in last season, he played in 80 games, and so far he's played in 37 games. So he doesn't have like a major injury history. He would kind of just be the added piece, ideally to maybe convince the Lakers to give up both firsts. But I don't think the Lakers want to give up both firsts. Two, I don't think they should, because you're gonna have to pay those guys a lot. Luckily, that's basically your team for the next several seasons, right? So again, like that's why I'd really want the Lakers to make another move. And that's why I don't want them to give up both firsts, because I want them to be able to go make another move, because if you're moving off of Russ, then at that point you need to get as much talent and as many players as you can, because if you just do the Toronto deal and you give up both firsts, then basically your team is Fred, Boucher, Gary Trent, LeBron, and Davis for the next like 2 or 3 years, and then the rest is like vet minimum contracts. Where at least if you did this deal and you could do it for one first, well then now you could take the other first. Like I said, you could go get a Bojan Bogdanovic, you could go get maybe Alec Burke, or maybe you go look to do like a Hornets deal or something like that, because at that point you're all in, right? Like you might as well. So if the Lakers could figure it out, I don't know if Toronto would do it, but I mean the real prizes are Gary Trent, Fred VanVleet, right? Those are the two guys that you'd come in. They're both complementary guards, but you gotta find a way to unload Patrick Beverley, Kendrick Nunn, and maybe Lonnie Walker as well, because now you just don't have the use for them, right? I mean, maybe Lonnie Walker this year, but you're probably losing him anyway, especially if you get Gary Trent, right? So this is your basically your starting five for the next several seasons is these two, LeBron and AD. And then whoever you could get as your small forward, whether that's Austin Reeves or somebody else, right? If you can get somebody via trade like a Bojan or whatever, Cam Reddish, something, right? So if you're the Lakers, I ideally you want assets to be able to make a push for other pieces. But if the Lakers could get these two, I am all for it, especially Gary Trent. Like Gary Trent to me is the real prize. I really am a fan of Gary Trent. I think Gary Trent would be nice, and I would love to see Gary Trent in a Lakers jersey, because he's a guy you could have for the next 10 years and he'd still be in his prime. He'd still only be 33 years old. So that's perfect, right? We need young, talented players for the future. Imagine having him and like Max Christie and, Austin Reeves, if you go get a Cam Reddish, like guys like that, like now you're starting to put together this young core as well. Gary Trent is already proven. He's already solid. He can score on all three levels. Like that's about as good as it gets, especially for a 23-year-old. So like that, in my opinion, is the real prize. Like that's who you're trying to trade for. And again, he's a guy that you're probably going after to try to sign by, this off season. So if you can get him now, get his bird rights, and as well as get some other pieces, then I think you do it. So these are the two guys that I really want to see the Lakers try to make a push for. There seems to be a lot of just talks about it, which could just be because Toronto's opened the door now, right? And kind of, released the floodgates of like, hey, we're open to do business, so let's do some business. So, and it's the Lakers, so of course, teams are going to use them as leverage, articles are going to use them as leverage, all of those things. So anyway, as always, this is a discussion, so I pass the question on to you. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. What do you think? Would you want the Lakers to do a deal for Gary Trent Jr. and Fred VanVleet? And, if you could get an add-on of, Chris Boucher, would you do it? Do you think, give up both seconds for this deal? Do you think, like, no, because you do have to pay a lot for Fred? Like, Fred is my problem, right? Like, I wouldn't mind going and getting Gary Trent just by himself, and I would even give up a first, because your hope with that first round pick is to get a guy like Gary Trent, right? So you're basically just expediting that process. So even if they just went and traded a first for Gary Trent straight up, I would be okay with it. But if you're going to do Fred, I can't give up another first for Fred. Like, even if they add Boucher, like Boucher, I think would be a solid addition. I think he could help, but he's not that important to where it's like, okay, like, so if you could get these guys and do 2 seconds, like, then I would do it, because I think now it's worth it. And I do think Fred is a guy, as a point guard, that would just be a perfect complement next to LeBron James, because he's almost better suited as a shooting guard than a point guard. And then now you have these two for the foreseeable future, along with AD, LeBron. So I just think it depends on how it plays out. But anyway, love to hear your thoughts and opinions down in the comment section below.